In today's episode, we'll be sharing some chilling night drive horror stories. But before we begin, consider giving us a like. It helps a lot. Also, if you've got a true story of your own, send to me, and I'll probably add it to a future video. The night felt unusually quiet as I stepped out of my classmate's house in the foothills. The air was sharp, carrying the faint smell of pine, and the darkness seemed denser than usual, with only the moonlight breaking through. It was late, later than I had planned to leave, but I didn't think much of it. The drive back was supposed to be uneventful, just a stretch of winding roads surrounded by tall trees and shadowy hills. I started the car, the familiar hum of the engine bringing a slight sense of comfort. The glow of the dashboard illuminated the interior, and as I pulled onto the narrow road, I reminded myself to stay focused. These roads were known for unexpected wildlife and sharp turns. Still, there was an uneasy feeling I couldn't shake. My phone's GPS glowed faintly beside me, but I already knew the route by heart. The solitude was both calming and unnerving. Every so often, I glanced in the rearview mirror expecting nothing, and yet something. It wasn't until I rounded a bend that I saw it, a pickup truck parked diagonally across the road. Its headlights were off, and the vehicle's worn exterior blended into the night. I slowed down, squinting to make sense of the scene. As I approached, the outline of a man became visible inside the truck, slumped over the steering wheel. My heart skipped. It looked as though he had passed out, maybe from a medical emergency or an accident. The logical part of my mind urged me to help, but another voice, quieter yet firmer, told me to stay put. Something wasn't right. I stopped the car a safe distance away, my headlights casting a stark glare on the truck and its occupant. The man didn't move, not even a twitch. The unease I had felt earlier turned into a tight knot in my stomach. I scanned the surroundings through the windshield and mirrors. Trees loomed on either side of the road, their dark silhouettes providing ample cover for anyone or anything lurking. My thoughts raced. It could be nothing, a genuine accident, a drunk driver passed out. But then, I remembered stories I'd heard, staged accidents to lure victims on remote roads. Each detail I had once dismissed as urban legend now felt terrifyingly plausible. I leaned forward, gripping the steering wheel, and debated what to do. My first instinct was to call for help, but my phone was just out of reach on the passenger seat, and I didn't want to take my eyes off the truck. The man still hadn't moved. The seconds stretched into what felt like minutes, and my heartbeat quickened with every one of them. Finally, I decided. If this was a trap, staying here would only make me an easier target. My hands fumbled as I shifted into reverse. The car rolled back slowly, tires crunching against the gravel road. I kept my gaze fixed on the truck, half expecting the man to move at any moment. And then, he did. The unconscious man suddenly straightened, jerking upright as if awakened from a deep sleep. My breath caught as I saw him climb out of the truck. He moved quickly, more quickly than someone disoriented should. Before I could process what was happening, I saw more figures. 3, maybe 4, emerge from the camper shell of the truck. They spilled out like shadows, all heading straight for me. Panic overtook every thought. My instincts screamed for me to get out of there, but my car was still rolling backward. I slammed on the gas, the tires screeching against the gravel as I reversed faster than I should have. The truck, the figures, and the man were all illuminated by my taillights, their movements surreal in the glow. The man who had been in the driver's seat was already closing the distance between us, his strides quick and deliberate. The others moved with a similar urgency, spreading out slightly as though to flank my car. My hands trembled as I gripped the wheel tighter, steering clumsily as I backed into a sharp turn. The edge of the road gave way to a small pull-off area, but the tight space forced me into a sharp angle. I felt the sickening crunch of metal as the side of my car scraped against a tree. The sound jolted me, but I didn't stop. I straightened the car out as best I could, the damage barely registering in my mind. The truck and the figures grew smaller in my rearview mirror, but one of them was still close enough to reach me. He darted toward the passenger side and grabbed at the door handle. I heard the dull clink as he tried to open it. Locked. Relief was fleeting, though, as I saw his face, expressionless, determined, before he pulled back, ready to try again. My car jerked forward as I threw it into drive, the engine straining against the abuse. I veered onto the road, narrowly missing another tree as I sped away. My headlights sliced through the darkness, and I didn't dare look back. The sound of my heart pounding drowned out everything else. The road felt endless, each turn more suffocating than the last. The trees closed in, their dark forms pressing against the narrow stretch of asphalt, as if they, too, were part of the ambush. My car groaned in protest, the damage from the scrape evident in the way it pulled slightly to one side. But I couldn't stop. I stole a glance in the rearview mirror. The figures were no longer visible, but my paranoia refused to believe I was safe. Every shadow on the road seemed to twist and morph, making me think they were still following. I gritted my teeth and pressed the gas pedal harder, desperate to put more distance between me and them. My mind raced as much as my car. What would have happened if I hadn't locked the doors? If I had hesitated even a second longer? The thought made my stomach churn. I pushed the car as fast as it would go, the wind whistling through a crack in the window where the frame had bent during my escape. When I saw the familiar driveway of my classmate's house, I swerved into it, tires skidding against the pavement. The house was dark except for a single porch light, a beacon of safety. I slammed the brakes and threw the car into park, leaving the engine running as I stumbled out and sprinted to the front door. Inside, the house felt like a sanctuary. My chest heaved as I leaned against the door, locking it with shaky hands. My classmate appeared, startled, as I blurted out what had happened. Their face paled as I described the truck, the figures, and the narrow escape. They quickly grabbed their phone and called the police. The next few hours passed in a blur. An officer arrived to take my statement, their notepad filling with details I could barely piece together. The damage to my car was clear evidence of how desperate the situation had been, but it was the locked passenger door that stayed in my mind. That single barrier had been the difference between safety and whatever those men had planned. The officer nodded grimly, mentioning similar incidents in the area. Staged accidents, ambushes on lonely roads, they were tactics meant to trap people who hesitated. Hearing that confirmation only deepened the fear I felt. As the police car's lights disappeared into the night, I stood in the doorway, staring out at the dark road beyond the trees. The feeling of being watched lingered, even though I knew they were gone. I couldn't bring myself to imagine what would have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts. The air was crisp as we wound our way up the mountain road, the headlights cutting through the darkness like a blade. I'd driven this route dozens of times before, but tonight felt different. The quiet was thicker, the shadows heavier, and every sound seemed to carry a sharper edge. Rose sat beside me, her eyes wide with curiosity as she leaned toward the window, taking in the faint outlines of the forest and the rolling peaks beyond. "It's beautiful," she murmured, breaking the silence. I nodded, though my focus was locked on the road ahead. The mountains at night had their own kind of allure, majestic yet unsettling. We left the paved section of the road behind, and the tires crunched onto the gravel. I knew this stretch well. It was one of the more isolated routes, leading to trails that locals rarely ventured at night. It was perfect for stargazing, or sharing a moment of stillness with someone who hadn't experienced the mountains' nocturnal beauty. But tonight, the calm was laced with unease. As we rounded a bend, a faint amber glow appeared in the distance, hovering near the edge of a field where nothing should have been. My grip tightened on the wheel. "What is that?" Rose asked, her voice carrying a slight edge. I didn't answer right away. I knew this area like the back of my hand, and there were no lights, no houses, no utility poles, just wilderness. The glow was soft, yet unnatural, flickering slightly, as if it were alive. "It's probably nothing," I said, though my gut told me otherwise. We drove closer, the amber light growing brighter, illuminating the treetops with an otherworldly sheen. My pulse quickened, a low hum of instinct telling me this wasn't something to approach. Rose leaned forward, her hand resting on the dashboard. "Are we getting closer to it?" she asked. Her voice wasn't panicked, but I could hear the tension beneath the surface. I slowed the car to a crawl. The glow seemed to shimmer, almost shift, as if reacting to our presence. My thoughts raced, bringing up stories I'd heard over the years, accounts of strange encounters in the mountains, unexplained lights, and disappearances. "Maybe we should turn around," I said, finally breaking the silence. Rose didn't argue. Her trust in my judgment was evident, and I didn't waste time. I found a spot wide enough to execute a three-point turn, my headlights briefly illuminating the thick woods on either side. The trees seemed to close in as I reversed, their dark forms leaning toward the car like silent witnesses. As I straightened the wheel and began driving back the way we came, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The light flickered once, then dimmed, as if retreating into the darkness. The sight made my chest tighten, though I kept my focus forward. Neither of us spoke for the next few minutes. The road felt longer, the gravel crunching louder beneath the tires. I tried to shake the feeling that we weren't alone, but the silence pressed down, thick and suffocating. It wasn't until we rounded a familiar bend that something even more unsettling came into view. The sight of the truck hit me like a cold splash of water. It hadn't been there before, not when we'd passed this spot just minutes earlier. The white truck and its trailer sat in the middle of a wide pullout, its paint reflecting faintly under the moonlight. A group of men, 5 or 6, moved hurriedly around the vehicle. As we approached, my headlights illuminated the scene. One of the men was backing a UTV, a small off-road vehicle, off the trailer in a reckless manner. The engine growled loudly, shattering the stillness of the night. Another man stood nearby, gesturing wildly, his movements sharp and frantic. The rest of the group was scattered around, their figures tense and purposeful. It didn't make sense. This was the middle of nowhere, and their urgency felt off, like they were racing against something unseen. Rose gripped the armrest beside her. "What are they doing?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I didn't answer. My instincts screamed to keep driving, to put as much distance between us and them as possible. Slowing down to analyze the situation felt like a mistake. I pressed harder on the gas, the car speeding up slightly as we passed the pullout. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw one of the men break away from the group and run toward us. He wasn't waving or shouting. There was no indication he needed help. He simply sprinted behind the car, his intent unreadable but unmistakably unsettling. I clenched the steering wheel and accelerated. The road was narrow, and my headlights barely seemed to cut through the dark, but I couldn't stop. Not here. Not with them. The sound of the car's engine roared in my ears as we sped down the winding mountain road. My eyes flicked constantly to the rearview mirror, searching for headlights or movement in the distance. Nothing yet. "What did he want?" Rose whispered, her voice shaking. I didn't respond. I couldn't, not with my mind racing like this. My foot pressed harder on the gas, the car protesting slightly as we hit a patch of uneven gravel. The thought of the men, of the one running behind us, sent a surge of adrenaline through me. Every shadow on the road seemed to stretch and twist, playing tricks on my vision. The isolation of the mountains, which had always felt peaceful, now felt like a trap. If they wanted to follow us, there would be no one to stop them. I glanced in the mirror again. Still nothing. But the absence of pursuit didn't calm me. It only deepened the sense of unease. As though they knew they didn't need to chase us to make their presence felt. The road ahead dipped into a series of tight curves, and I focused on keeping control. One wrong move and we could slide off the edge, down into the dense forest below. I pushed the car harder than I ever had, the tires skidding slightly on the loose gravel. Finally, the first signs of civilization came into view. A faint glow in the distance, the lights of the town below. Relief washed over me, but I didn't dare slow down. Not yet. The crowded parking lot of the restaurant felt surreal as we pulled in, the hum of life all around us. Cars idled, people laughed, and the glow of the neon sign seemed almost too bright after the oppressive darkness of the mountain road. I parked the car, my hands still trembling as I turned off the engine. Rose and I sat in silence for a moment, neither of us ready to step outside. My heart was still racing, and my mind replayed the sequence of events. The light, the truck, the men. It didn't make sense. Inside, the warmth and noise of the restaurant were a welcome distraction. We ordered coffee, though neither of us drank much of it. Instead, we talked in hushed tones, trying to piece together what we'd seen. The men's frantic movements, the reckless unloading of the UTV, it all felt so deliberate, so wrong. "What were they doing out there?" Rose asked, her voice shaky. I didn't have an answer. Theories floated between us, but none felt satisfying. It could have been illegal activity, some bizarre ritual, or just an isolated incident of strange behavior. The night was calm as I turned onto the back road leading home, my headlights slicing through the stillness of my small Midwestern town. This route had always felt safe, a shortcut I'd taken countless times to avoid the longer, busier highway. The houses were spaced far apart, their windows dark, the only signs of life, the occasional porch light or shadow of a tree swaying in the wind. It was late, and the usual quiet of the town seemed amplified. I'd finished a long evening of studying and was eager to get home. My car hummed steadily as I approached the stop sign at the intersection near my house. It was a familiar landmark, a place where I always felt close enough to let my guard down. As I rolled to a stop, I glanced to my left and noticed a truck approaching. It was an older model, its headlights glaring brighter than most, but something about the way it moved caught my attention. Instead of passing through the intersection or signaling a turn, the truck slowed, eventually coming to a full stop. I sat there, waiting for it to move, but it didn't. It just lingered, its engine idling. The driver didn't flash their lights or make any indication of their next move. A knot formed in my stomach as the realization hit me. It wasn't acting like a normal vehicle on the road. It felt deliberate, like it was waiting for me. My pulse quickened. I glanced down the empty road ahead of me and made a decision. I turned onto my street and headed home, the truck's lights glaring in my rearview mirror as it followed close behind. The truck's headlights filled my rearview mirror, its presence an unwelcome weight pressing down on me. It followed closely, maintaining a distance just close enough to feel invasive, but far enough to make its intentions unclear. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, my mind racing as I tried to decide what to do. I considered my options. I could slow down, let it pass, but something told me that wasn't what this driver wanted. I could speed up, but this wasn't the kind of road where you could outrun someone. The speed limit was low, and the last thing I wanted was to lose control in the dark. The truck didn't waver. It stayed right there, matching my speed exactly. Its headlights, blinding in their intensity, seemed to burn into the back of my car, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were more than just lights. They felt like eyes, unblinking and focused entirely on me. My house wasn't far now, and the thought of its safety was tempting, but I hesitated. Would pulling into my driveway be a mistake? If this person had bad intentions, I'd be leading them straight to where I lived. My thoughts spiraled as the truck's presence became unbearable. I drove past the first turnoff toward my street, trying to see if the truck would follow. It did. My throat tightened as I passed the second turnoff, then the third. Still, it remained behind me, its persistence making my heart pound harder with every second. Finally, I made my decision. I turned into my driveway, pressing the button to open the garage. My car slid into the familiar space, and I hit the button again, watching as the garage door descended behind me. I rushed into the house, locking the door with trembling hands, praying that the truck would move on. Once inside, I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. My heart pounded so loudly that it seemed to echo in the quiet of the house. I turned off the porch light, not wanting to draw any more attention to my home. Slowly, I made my way to the window overlooking the driveway, careful to stay out of sight. The truck was there. Its headlights illuminated the edge of my driveway, casting long, eerie shadows across the yard. I watched as it rolled in slowly, the engine humming in a low, deliberate growl. It didn't park, but stopped briefly, as if the driver was deciding their next move. My stomach churned as I crouched lower, peeking from the corner of the window. The truck's silhouette was ominous, its size dwarfing my small car parked in the driveway. I could see no details of the driver, just the faint outline of movement in the cab. For a moment, I was paralyzed, unsure of what to do. Should I call the police? Should I wait? My phone was still in my bag by the front door, but I didn't dare move away from the window. The truck sat there for what felt like an eternity, its idling engine the only sound in the night. And then, without warning, it reversed, backing out of the driveway with the same eerie calm it had entered. Its taillights flickered as it turned back onto the road and disappeared into the darkness, leaving nothing but the faint smell of exhaust behind. Even after the truck was gone, I couldn't bring myself to move from the window. My eyes were glued to the driveway, scanning the shadows for any sign of its return. Every small noise, a creak of the house, a rustle of leaves outside, made me flinch. I finally forced myself to grab my phone. My hands were shaking so badly that it took 3 tries to unlock the screen. I hovered over the keypad, debating whether to call the police. What would I even say? That a truck followed me and parked in my driveway for a few minutes before leaving? There was no license plate, no description of the driver, nothing tangible to report. Instead, I texted a friend, recounting what had happened in broken, hurried sentences. Their response was immediate and concerned, urging me to call someone or stay alert. I nodded to myself, even though no one could see me, and double-checked every lock in the house. Hours passed, but sleep never came. The next morning, the driveway looked perfectly ordinary, but it felt tainted. I couldn't step outside without glancing over my shoulder, half expecting the truck to appear again. Every vehicle that passed on the road sent a jolt of unease through me. I avoided the back road from that night onward, opting for the highway instead, even if it added time to my commute.